Hello, and welcome to this week's dose of insight on digital experience and innovation for the education sector from Smile. So, Elliot, over the last week, you've been looking at the cost of attending open days. I know that you didn't necessarily go to university, so I guess this is probably as unbiased as we can get without finding a real prospect. Am I right in thinking that you looked at three different locations for this?
Four actually.
Oh, okay.
So looked at a few cases and kind of differences in those. So like traveling, public transport, driving, staying overnight, all these kind of aspects of an open day that people don't really not consider, but you don't think about it up front, I guess.
Mm.
And kind of the associated costs with all of those things. So one of the cases was that we kind of chose that living in Birmingham was kind of the same across all of them because we are based in Birmingham and it's quite central in the country. And case one was that you were traveling with your parents to, like, I think it was Durham or Newcastle, up north. They are up north.
Fair track.
Yeah. And that none of them drove, so you'd be on public transport, and it's kind of considering all of those costs. Do you want to know the costs? I've got the costs.
Yeah, definitely.
So I kind of looked into them, taking the coach, which was about, I'm looking at my graph here, and I think it was about £35 for the three of them return. And then on top of that was like hotel, which comes out at about £115, which is quite expensive for the one night, I guess.
One room as well.
I think it was one room, yeah.
So I'm not saying that you've cheapskated on this, but it's probably, this is doing it as cheap as possible,
Yeah.
realistically, isn't it?
And then obviously things like food while you're there, and then like breakfast in the morning, whether they want that. And kind of altogether, that kind of came to about 225-ish.
Right.
Which is quite a lot of money.
It is, yeah.
So, and if you think about that, kind of multiply that by 3 or 4, because how many do you have to choose when you apply? Is it?
Well, I think that there might even be limitations on the amount of open days that you can attend, at least physically. And you got to remember that these prospects they're at college or sixth form, so they potentially might even have to take time off from that. So I think at the moment, there's not many kids taking 10 days off just to go to, I think it's 3. You probably visiting 2 or 3. But even at that, 2 or 3 at £200 a pop.
Yeah, I know my mum would not have let me take time off to go to university open day. She would have been like, "No, get back to college."
And I think though that the thing here is, yes, okay, sure, there's a financial implication, but John, I mean, you did go to university, right? And I assume that you probably did go to 2 or 3 open days. What about the expectations around time on that for you?
Yeah, well, I actually ended up going to around 5 or 6 open days. Didn't take any time off to do that, but I think this kind of feeds into the point I think I was making before we started, which is the kind of implicit the time that it takes to plan going and to actually to attend the open days. And I guess me and my mum and my dad in some instances, we travelled around on weekends, so didn't have to take time off out of study at all, but still that was like a weekend gone kind of thing, like 6 weekends gone over the course of the year. And I think that sometimes you will go to quite a few because it's kind of a major choice, especially when you're like a terrified 18-year-old. This is going to be the place where you're going to live for the next 3 years, and you want to get it right. And I think there's quite a lot of stress that goes into planning which weekends you're going to be free to travel that far, that kind of thing. So aside from any of the money costs, I know we're going to compare this to sort of online open days moving forward. There's also like a fair chunk of time and planning it takes that's obviously different to online open days, and that there won't be so much of that. But yeah, I definitely remember that kind of hidden non-monetary cost playing open days as well.
So Elliot, in your desk research, what about the kind of, did you do anything that was a little bit closer to home? Because I mean, I've done the kind of the trek from Birmingham up Newcastle way, and that is I've done that in the car, and it's a serious investment of time. But there are, of course, local universities for prospects. Did you do any research into that?
So I did the two that were kind of far afield. Is that all right? Yeah. And then I did two that were a little bit closer. So I looked at attending one of the Birmingham universities, and I think it was looking at Kiel, which is about an hour away, maybe. And kind of the costs were massively reduced, I must admit. So with everything kind of, travel for the kind of the hour away, so like Kiel kind of area, was about £60-70, I think. And the case was, I'm just looking at my notes now. I'm reading through. So it was, they wanted to go with the parents, and the parents do drive. So it was kind of, thinking about like petrol, and then again, you forget that you need to like eat during the day, and it's like, I'm going to need to spend some money on food. And same with the one a bit closer to home. So if they went to like Aston University, for example, there's one cost for like a train to get into Birmingham. And then again, like food was always like maybe I just like food too much. Like food, you must eat.
I guess the point is food costs the same everywhere, right? So whether you're traveling, 5 minutes away or an hour away, that sandwich is still going to cost. It's still going to rack up. And
when you're in like a train station as well, like food is more expensive in a train station than it is anywhere else. I think, I don't actually know if that's true, but the cost was massively reduced. So in comparison to the 225 for kind of travel to Newcastle, I think the cost came down to 25-ish.
Right. Okay.
Which is still, it's not cheap.
And I mean, I guess what we're kind of looking at here is that there's the time investment we all know exists, as John's quite rightly pointed out, but there's essentially a hidden expectation somewhat around having to spend money, an actual financial burden on attending open days as well. And I find that particularly interesting. We've been doing a lot of work on online open days recently, and clearly it's a different kettle of fish with that. And we'll take a look at that in future versions of these chats and stuff. But John, do you think that there is a good reason here to utilise online open days in a post-pandemic sense as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think the situation's forced a lot of events that would normally take place physically online. But I think it's sort of making people realise that moving forward, even without a global pandemic going on, there are huge advantages to holding events online. All the reasons we've discussed already, with attending open days and the things we're going to discuss in future episodes. It's a lot more cheaper and a lot more convenient to hold these things online. And I guess we're looking at maybe getting some feedback from the people who are listening to this. I know we're going to be posting this on lots of different platforms. I think our blog especially, which we're going to enable comments on, and it's going to be a really good opportunity to get some feedback from the people listening. So if you've got anything to input on what you've heard today, like any challenges that maybe you discovered on your open day treks, or whether you work in higher education and further education, and you hear anecdotally from a lot of students, we'd love to hear from you, see what your struggles were or what your students' struggles were, and that's give us some content to to talk more about on future episodes.
My mum and dad would definitely challenge Elliot's food purchasing habits. They would, they'd 100% be packing packed lunches for their days out.
So would I, but I know a lot of people that don't do that.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Like, and I think you forget that, like, that is part of the open day. Like,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, like,
it's all part of the kind of the luxury of that experience, I think, isn't it? Well, that's brilliant. Thanks for that, everybody. Next week, we'll take a look at the cost of attending an online open day and probably some comparison in the types of value and the contrast between physical and online. And, we've talked about hidden costs today with physical ones, but there's definitely some hidden costs in online open days too. We'll be sure to take a look at that. If you're interested in finding out more about what we do at Smile, you can find us on wearesmile.com.